Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. My name is Mel and I'm really excited that we're about to paint. So I'm really excited because we're doing something new today. We are going to paint our truck full of pumpkins, and it's on a wooden cutout, and I'm super excited about that because there are a lot of you that want to paint, but you're a little intimidated about form and shape and creating them on your own. So this is going to be a fantastic way for you to do that. Let me show you what's going on. So what we've got here is what you've received in your kit. It's a wooden cutout with the shape of the truck and all the pumpkins, but everything is just sort of laser etched. So we don't have to guess about the size or the shape. We don't have to worry about our truck being wonky. Everything is just basically ready for us to color it in. So we're gonna make this painting really pop by using some shading, some metallic paints, and just, having a little fun with it. Okay, so before we get going, let's go over the colors and the materials that we're using, and then we'll get busy painting. Okay, so today I'm gonna use 3 brushes. I've got a 1/2 inch flat, it's got a flat top, and it's 1/2 inch wide, 1/2 inch flat. I'll call it your big brush or your big flat brush. Then we've got a small 1/4 inch flat. It's kind of flat on the top there. We've got that guy. And then we've got a small round or pointy tip brush. And we'll just use these for little bits of detail, and they're really interchangeable. I put them both in there so that you can figure out which tool you're most comfortable with. Let's take a quick look at our palette today. We've got red, orange. I say orange funny because I'm from Brooklyn. It's one of those habits I just can't get rid of. Yellow, copper, silver, black, white, and a dark phthalo blue. A midnight or a royal blue, a cobalt blue would all work. And this is a bright red, in case you're wondering. You could use a fire red or even a deep red if you wanted to. I like to go with a bright red because you can deepen it up with black and you can lighten it up as you need to. Oh, and by the way, I'm using something called palette paper. It's matte on one side and shiny or waxy on the other. And I can use it on the table just like I would a palette. And the fun thing about this is when you're all done, you can sort of play with the paint and then you've got a whole nother piece to hang up. I know artists that collect these and use them in other projects. Just a little side note. And last, but certainly not least, I've got an old plastic cup, actually several of them stacked inside each other. And I'm gonna put a couple inches of just tap water in there. I always recommend using cool water rather than warm. Warm water will sometimes melt the glue that holds your brushes together, and that's no fun. And along with your water, don't forget to grab a paper towel or an old wash rag or t-shirt, just some old cleaning rag that you can use to dry your brushes off with. Okay, so first let me apologize for the hum of the air conditioner. It's 90 degrees out and super humid, and I just can't. I would be a hot mess and melt in front of you if we turned it off, so I apologize for the hum. But let's get rolling. We've got our cutout here, my palette's all set up, I've got my water and my brushes. So let me explain a little bit real quickly about what order we're gonna work in. I like to start with whatever was furthest in the distance and work my way back. So that means we're gonna start off with the sky that we can see through our windshield, and we're going to start off with our tires. So let's start off with the sky first. Now, you can make your sky as bright or as light as you'd like. What I'm gonna do is use this 1/2 inch brush, the largest brush that we've got, and I'm gonna take a small scoop of white. It's about the size of a lima bean. And I'm gonna place that in an empty area over here on my mixing palette. And then I'm just gonna take the corner of my brush and get about a pea-sized amount of that dark blue and just sort of swirl them in together. I like to leave a little marbling, and let me show you what I am talking about there. We've got some marbling. Show it to both cameras I've got going on here. And I like the swirl because that's gonna give me different tones of blue in my sky so that it's not just all flat. Okay, now before I start painting, I'm painting on wood, so it's really important that I use a little bit of water because wood is very thirsty. So I'm just gonna tip the very dip of my bristles in the water, and just kind of work that into the edge of the paint. And I only want my paint to come about halfway down my brush. I'm just going to come in and start working on outlining. Now this is a pretty big piece. You may find it easier to paint if you lay it flat. I'm only keeping mine upright so that you guys can see what I'm doing. It's a little bit easier for me. And I'm just going to use the edge of my brush and get right up to that line. I just pull in one smooth stroke. It's okay if we go a little bit over the edge because we'll paint this in red, and of course we'll be painting in the pumpkins. I am going to try to keep it kind of clean. I'm just a little bit type A that way, so I want to make sure that I have nice clean edges. So cheers to my type A friends out there. Take a sip, it'll help, I promise. And we're just going to work our way around. So what I'm going to do now is put you on time lapse, and I'll meet up with you at the end. So just work your blue in all the way around, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Okay, so I've made it around most of the edges with that large brush. And what I want to do now is you can pick either of your smaller brushes, whether they have the round tip or the flat one. Pick whichever one works for you. I think I'm going to go with the flat one. Get those bristles a little bit damp and just get a little bit of paint there on the tip of those bristles. And I'm going to choke up on the bat and hold it right where the metal part or the ferrule of the brush is, like a pencil or a marker, and that way I'll have much better fine motor control. And I'm just going to take my time and work my way through these little bits where the sky is peeking through. And if I just take a few minutes and take my time doing it, I get to zone out. It's sort of meditative. But then I'm not going to end up messing anything up, getting a big hunk of blue in my pumpkin, or, oh, the air finally went off. I don't have to yell now. Anyway, I can just work my way around the edges and take my time, because it's a lot easier to do it right the first time than it is to come back in and try to clean those things up. It can be done, so don't lose hope if you get it. But like even these little sections here, these little cutouts where the vine curls, it's those fun details that if we were to draw and paint this painting on our own, we might not have the energy or the fortitude to get all of those in there. But because they're already sketched in, all we have to do is color it in. And I'm going to move this closer up for you in just a moment so that you can see how I have all these different shades of blue. Some are darker, some are lighter. And it just gives the sky a little bit more visual interest. Okay, there we go. So let me move this up so you can see. There are lots of different tones here. Lots and lots of different shades of blue there. Some are a little lighter, some are a little darker, and that's how the sky looks. So I'm going to leave it good enough for me. So get your sky filled in, and when you're ready, we're going to come back and work on these tires. Okay, so we are ready to work on our tires. And I'm going to keep that fairly simple. I've got a little tread that I put on later. So for now, I'm just going to clean my big brush. I want to just give it a nice sweep across the bottom of that cup. Wiggle those bristles so that they let go of the paint. And then you're going to drag your bristles across the edge of your cup like you're scraping the frosting spatula on the side of the bowl. But come on, we all know you lick the frosting spatula. Everybody does. We're all savages. Okay, give it a little press into my paper towel. And I'm just going to pick up some black paint. Again, we don't need a lot. Just about almost halfway down. And we can just come in and paint the tires. One nice thin coat. Remember, a little tiny dip of the tip of your bristles into the water so that we can Get that acrylic paint flowing smoothly across this wooden surface. And you may find as it dries that it becomes a little bit transparent. So if you want to, it's always okay to put on a second coat. Just pause the video, take your time, go back, get a second coat in there. Just gonna drag that right along that edge underneath that fender or bumper. What's the difference between a fender and a bumper? Are they the same thing? I'll have to Google that later. Okay. And now the other one. Easy peasy. So take a minute, finish up what you're doing, work on your tire. When you come back, we're going to start working on our pumpkins. I'm going to get those guys in, at least these that are in the background. Actually, no, I was wrong. We're going to do the truck next. I have a list back here. I've made some notes. I should refer to them, right? So we're going to do the truck, and then we'll worry about the pumpkins. So get your black tires painted in, and I'll see you in just a little bit. Okay, so next we are going to work on the truck itself. And there are a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, this is not one coat of paint. I use a basic coat of red in all of the areas that we're going to do, just plain red by itself. And then I come through with a little bit of darker red that we'll make by adding some black to it. And I come around the areas where I want to put just a little bit of depth. So where there are curves, like up here around the windows, maybe around the edge of the pumpkins or above the tire wells, even around the curves of the tailgate, that's the word. So we're going to do a basic coat of red first. Then I'll show you how to come in and add some depth with a little bit of shadow by using more of a wine red or burgundy. And then we'll mix a little copper paint in with our red and add some highlights. So let's get going. First, let's clean that big brush, sweep it across the bottom of your cup and get all that extra paint out. Drag those bristles to get the excess water out. Sometimes if it looks really goopy when I do that, I go back in for a double dip. And then I'm just going to sweep it off. That'll help take out any excess paint there. Now I'm going to use a little bit of water. You can use a clean cup of water. I'm kind of a savage, so I just dip into my paint water. But I'm just going to get a little bit of red and start coming around. Now you see me crossing over this line here. That's okay, because I'm still going to be able to see it through this base layer. We'll still be able to see where the lines are. This paint isn't enough to cover it up. If you're painting with your own paint, you're using like a really heavy bodied acrylic, you might want to be a little bit more mindful, because they tend to have, they're a little thicker and they've got more saturation to them. Okay, so we're just going to work our way around. You can see I'm working my way around the lights. I'll go down in between, across here, leave that alone, around the edge of the mirrors, and then around the top. So I'm going to put you onto time lapse, and I'll see you once we get all this red on. Now remember, real quick before I go, if you need to, use a skinny brush to pop in and do these smaller areas. You can either use the small flat brush or the small round pointy one. It's entirely up to you. All right, you guys, I'll see you on the other side. Now, one thing I want to point out is you can turn this and put it on its side, whatever you need to do so that you can reach whatever part you're working on. So I want to work on this top section, and I want to keep my arm nice and close to me so that I can give a good clean line pull. It's like a pro level move right there, you guys. Okay, so we've got our base coat of red, and you can see there's quite a difference here in these colors. This one's much darker than our bright red. We can go with the bright red. You can just put another coat of that on. You don't have to fuss with the shadow if you don't want to. It'll still be adorable. But I'm gonna fuss with the shadow a little bit. So I'm gonna take my big brush out of the water. I'm just gonna drag the excess water off. I don't wanna clean it because I'm just gonna use more red paint. But somehow the end of my brush got in my blue and I'm a hot mess. Ugh. All right, that's why you don't wear clothes you care about. Okay, so I'm gonna take a scoop of red of the size of a lima bean here. Let me make sure I get that in front of the camera. And then I'm gonna grab just a tiny dip, tiniest dip of black and swirl that in. I can always come back for more black, but it'll take a lot of red to tone down a color that's gone too dark. So let me hold this up so that you can see the difference in the two shades. This is my original red, and this is the one that we added some black to. So you can use the big brush or you can use your smaller brush, whichever one you like. What I like to do is just start coming around the edges where my lines are. So around my fender here, and just sort of drag it down, not using a lot of paint. Coming around the edge of my tailgate, and I'm going basically right over that line so that there's a little bit of shadow on the body of the truck and a little bit on the tailgate itself. And what I recommend is at this point we're going to do one section at a time, because we need to do our blending while our paint is wet. So let's start with the tailgate because it's a fairly simple shape and it'll be a good space for us to practice. So I'm just dragging that winey darker red around the edges, just like that. I'm going to make sure to get some more shadow down here, maybe even add a little more black. So I just don't feel like that's dark enough. There we go. Now I've got a little shadow going. And once I work my way around, here's where the handle is. So we're going to put a little shadow there as well. It's like the little belly button of the tailgate. Just going to wipe off that excess paint and grab a little bit of plain red by itself. And starting right at the edge of where that darker red ends, just sort of overlapping and sweeping it through. I don't need to come all the way into the middle, but if you want a little better coverage, you can. And you blend it, just like those girls on Instagram that are doing their makeup with a little sponge. You just work your way in. And then now, without even cleaning my brush, I'm going to come into the edge of the copper while this red is all still wet and just wisp a little bit through. We're just going for little hints of light here. Just little bits. And let me move this a little closer so that you guys can get a good view. You see that shadow there? The shadow and the shine from that copper. So I've got the tailgate done. I'm going to give my brush a little rinse because I don't want it getting too swollen or messy. And now I'm going to work on the wheel wells. So a little bit of that dark color, again, right over the line. Maybe a little more closer to the tailgate and where that fender is. Just little dabs, little bits. And then, without even cleaning the brush, just grab a little bit more red and work your way around. And when you're ready, a little bit of copper. And because we have a curve here, this is a really good opportunity to just bring a little bit of that copper around the curve. And it'll look pretty streaky until it dries, but then it's going to give you some really fun highlights. All right, let's keep going. Now, I've done one wheel well. I'm just going to work my way up and around. So I've got a little bit of my dark shadow color here. I'm coming around the edge of the pumpkin, maybe around the edge of the mirror or the car, the top here. Don't forget to use a little bit of water once in a while so that paint will move more smoothly. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm just going to come back and get a little bit of red. Come over this, because once that dries, if I don't move this paint and blend it while it's still wet, we'll end up with like darker shadows that you may not really like. And then you've got to do another layer to get over that. So I'm trying to be efficient. All right, let's see how we're doing there. Looking pretty good. I'm just going to flip it upside down so that I can reach the other side without too much difficulty. And depending on how deep these shadows end up being after drying, I may come back in and add a little more. That's the beauty about painting on our own like this, or kind of on our own. We're kind of in control of how much time we spend on different parts of the painting. So you can always pause me, fast forward, take your time, do what you want to do, and then catch up on the next step. Just remember, if you're blending, you want to move faster than your paint dries. That's pretty much the only caveat here. You want to move faster than the paint dries. All right, got a little copper for that. Just a few little streaks here and there. Just to create a little bit of pop. Give us something fun to look at. And you don't really have to be fussy. Just put little bits of it in. So like I said, you can always go back and add a little more shadow if you want. I'm going to put just a little bit more around the edge of my tailgate so that it's got a little bit more depth. The red I'm using today is significantly lighter than the one I went with in the original, or the example that we're using. And that's okay. Every time we paint, something comes out a little bit different. I mean, that's the whole process of making art. And that's what's frankly so cool about it, if you ask me. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to get caught up here. Take your time. Don't feel like you have to rush. Hit the pause button, do what you need to do, and I'll be here when you get back. We'll start working on our pumpkins. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about these pumpkins. I think that there's a lot that you can do with these pumpkins. You could make them rainbow colors. You can make them all orange. You could make a ghost pumpkin like I've got here. What I'm going to do is show you how to do the ghost pumpkin first, and then I'm going to show you how to do one of the orange ones, and then you can follow that same principle whether you're using blue, whether you're using green, whether you're using purple or orange or white or whatever color you're using. We're going to use a darker shade, a medium shade, and a lighter shade. That's it. And I'll show you how to create the segments with the shadows, and then you can go to town and do your thing. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to start off with this big pumpkin, and I want to make sure, or excuse me, the ghost pumpkin up top. I want to make sure that my brush is really good and clean. I don't want it to be pink. So I'm just taking a moment, getting my brush clean. And the first thing I'm going to do is put down my base coat, which is going to be white, but I need to add just a little bit of shadow to it, or a little depth. So I've got a scoop of white about the size of a lima bean, And I'm going to take just a tiny bit of that metallic copper, just a tiny bit, and let that soften up that white. It's not going to change the color a whole lot. Shouldn't look like foundation. It should just have a slightly taupey beige tone to it. And I'm going to paint my entire pumpkin with this base coat. So just like with the other parts, when you're doing the edges, feel free to choke up on that brush. I'm going to go over the edge of that vine. I can put it back in later. And it's okay if we overlap a little because we're going to paint all of these. And white isn't a color we really need to worry about being too obnoxious underneath. So just a quick little base coat. All the way around all the segments. There we go. And then we're going to give this just a second. We don't want it to dry, but I want it to just give it 1 second, 1 second. I'm going to clean up my small round tip brush, again, taking extra time and care to get all that extra paint out of there. So we've got this pointy guy this time. And I'm going to take just a little bit of copper, a little bit more, and add it to that base tone. And this time it's going to look like foundation. Let me give you a quick peek there. It's right here. I'm going to take this and come right along the lines. And then let it stay darkest down in those little crooks and crannies, even in the back there. Come right along those lines. And it's not a huge pumpkin, so some of it may seem like it's taken over. That's okay, we'll put some more white on it in a second. But do you see how just adding that little bit of shadow is giving some depth to these segments? Just a little bit. And then I'm going to rinse off my brush. So we've got our base color, which is white, with a little tiny bit of our copper, and then we added more copper to that to put in our shadow. And now I just come in with little bits of white and try to hit the top parts of those curves where there's going to be shadow. I like to use really sort of loose, messy strokes for this part. We're not creating something photographic. It's really more expressionist. So I like to use chunky little strokes here. You could even use a tiny bit of yellow if you wanted to. Oop, that was too much. Wipe that off, grab a little more white. Clean it up. And I'm going to pull this closer for you to get a better view. I'll try to zoom in a bunch and post edit for you too. I wasn't crazy about that yellow, so I'm just trying to tone it down here. Made my pumpkin look a little jaundiced. Okay, let me pull this up so you can see. I've got some shadow in there, and I'm going to let it dry. We can always come back and add some more, do another coat. The other one I think has darker shadow. So what I'm going to want to do is maybe add just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. But I'll come back and look at that one once I get my other ones done. So, like I said earlier, we can use this sort of process of base tone, shadow, and light. It's just like contouring your face, like those girls on Instagram. All you gotta do Let's use those 3 shades. So I'm going to come in and paint all of my orange ones. I'm going to do all the rest of these in orange. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put that base coat in. So when you're ready, get your clean, big brush and your orange paint, and you're just going to come through and paint all of these. Remember, we can go over the lines with this base coat because we'll be able to see through it. Get those edges. If you need to, switch to a smaller brush. Use the tool that you feel like you're going to be the most comfortable with, because then you'll be more successful. And you'll have a better experience. Your art will turn out better. You'll feel better about it. You won't be like completely tired and worn out from the process. Just get it all filled in. Got our base coat of the orange in. And now I'm just going to start to darken things up. I'm going to make a little brown. I've got my small brush. I'm using the small flat one. You can use the small round one. But I'm going to grab about a pea-sized amount of copper and put just a tiny speck of black into that. I want to make it almost a little brown. And we can come through, and just like with our other guy here, in fact, let me come back and show you. Ooh, this one looks way better on the white too. See how I'm just starting right there at that top edge and pulling down a little bit, adding little specks and streaks. That gives it a little bit more shadow. That brown with the copper, chef's kiss, way better. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this on my ghost pumpkin. And then just smudge it out, blend it a little bit. If you need to, you can pick up a little bit more white, or that beige tone we made. But yeah, I feel a lot better about that pumpkin now. Like it's got more shadow. So I'm going to use that same brown, that metallic copper with a little bit of black, and do the same thing here with our larger pumpkins. Take that copper, bring it down along those lines, those segment lines, creating a little bit of shadow. Now if you've got a lot of paint on there, if you feel like your paint is sliding, it's not going to blend. If we've got too much paint, it just needs to dry a little bit. But even right now, see how goofy that looks? But I can come along, pick up little bits of orange and yellow together, and just start blending some of this out. Think about what would be the lightest. It's going to be where those curves are that reach up to the top. So I can use this darker tone around the edges, or in the depths of those segments, and then just pick up a little bit of orange by itself. Don't even need to clean my brush. And up close, it might look really streaky. This always happens, especially when you're painting super close to your face. Vision requires a little bit of distance so that your eyes can focus and you can get perspective on what you're painting. So if you're not sure about it, stand up and step back. And I don't just mean lean back in your chair. I mean get up, get your butt out of your chair, step back a good 6 to 10 feet, and all of a sudden things are going to look different. And we've got a lot of light on this guy, so I'm going to try to bring it closer to the camera. So that, oh, there we go, so that you can get a good view. See how we have all that depth in there now? Gonna make some more of that brown. Remember, it's copper with just a tiny touch of black. If you want to lighten it up, don't add white to it. That's going to give you a really gross color. But you can add, you can just take and add a little more copper to it. Now I'm going to let this mess here dry a little bit and keep working my way around. I'm not putting a whole lot of highlight on it yet. My paint is sliding quite a bit because I've got a lot on this wood and I need to give the wood a minute to soak it up. So I'm just going to keep working my way around, and then I'll come back through and clean this up. So shadow first, then you can use just a little bit of orange to blend it. Smooth that in. And then once it dries, we'll come back with some brighter shades of orange, some yellow, and we'll put some highlights on it. But for now, we're just worrying about those shadows. Okay, so I'll see you guys in just a few minutes. Take your time though. Don't stress yourself out. Give you an up close there. You see those shadows? They look a little serious and a little stark right now. Ooh, let me get you right in front. There we go. Little serious, little stark. But that's okay. When they dry and we come in and start adding those highlights, we'll make things pop. So take your time, finish up this coat. We'll come back in and add the highlights in a bit. But our next order of business is going to be our fender, our tail lights, and our mirrors. So I will see you guys when you're ready. Okay, so now we are going to work on our tail lights, on our fender, and our mirrors. So first, I'm just going to clean my small flat-topped brush out. This guy. And I'm going to use a little bit of silver. And I'm going to paint in the mirrors. It's going to take more than one coat. If you don't want to fuss with it a lot, you could always put gray down first, some white and black, and then once that's dry, you can put some silver over it. But keep in mind, metallic paint does not become shiny until it's dry. So what you want to do is let it dry, and then you come back and put another layer. It's sort of like nail polish. You can do thin coats, let one dry, do another one. 2 thin coats looks way better than 1 thick one. Alright, so I've got those little guys in. I'm going to switch to my larger brush for the fender. So smaller brush with the silver for the mirrors. And then I'm going to use the larger brush with the silver for the fender here. And I'm actually going to take a scoop of silver and add a tiny dab of black to it for the fender. Just a tiny dab. There are 50 shades of gray. You want something between 15 and 20. Not too dark. Alright, so let me show you what I came up with. Here's our silver, and here's what I've got when I add a little bit of black to it. And I'm going to use this darker silver for the fender. And then when I'm ready for the highlights, I'll just take a little bit of silver by itself. Oops, didn't make enough. Let's try that again. A little bit of black, a little bit of silver. And I leave the swirl in there so I get some streaks. It gives me a little more shadow. Now, personal confession time. I am a weirdo and I have a hard time making clean lines horizontally. But I'm a boss at doing them vertically. So I'm just going to flip my canvas over, or my wooden cutout here, And do you see my pinky? I'm using it like a kickstand. This is dry, so I can do that. Holding this way up by the metal, and I can just drag my arm. If I need to, I run out of paint, I just flip my brush over and continue until that's out. Get a little more paint. Using that kickstand, bringing my hand right down. And that'll get you a nice clean line. So if you have any type A in you like I do, take a sip and then go for it. Ooh, that had a lot of black in it. Right near that tire, but that's good because that'll be a little more shadow for me. It's going to get the rest of this filled in. There we go. Let's see how it looks. Pretty good. Oh, I sounded like Larry David, who's the most cringy human being on the planet, but it's a good expression. All right. So I'm gonna let that dry before I hit it with any more silver. We've got one coat on our mirrors. We've got our darker silver here, the first coat on our fender. And then I'm gonna do my little tail lights. I'm gonna use my small round brush. You can use whatever you want. And I'm just gonna use some copper. You can paint them in white, you can do whatever. I thought about white, but then I thought, oh, that's like backup lights. And I don't think our truck is in reverse. And with the copper, again, remember, metallic paint is not shiny until it dries. And it's also a little translucent with just one coat. So I'm going to get one coat of the copper on. And then I'm going to get my other small brush out and reverse my order, or repeat my process here, not reverse my order. I'll come back and do my mirrors with another little bit of silver, just plain silver. Remember, pause me when you need to. You can always come back and turn me back on to keep going when you're caught up. Silver. And I'm going to leave that alone. I'll come in a little bit with some white and put in a little highlight mark. So I'm just going to get my clean big brush. Whoops, I just put my paper towel right in my paint. Don't do that. Some silver. And I'm just going to do a few quick streaks through my fender or bumper. So it looks like there's a little bit of highlight. I go for loose and messy because that's intentional, and then I'm not worrying about trying to make something perfect. All right, one more quick review. Silver, I've got two coats on my mirrors. A coat of silver with a little bit of black on the bumper of the fender, and then a few quick streaks of silver over that. And you can do one or two coats of copper for your tail lights. And once you're all there, I don't know why I just did that. I felt like I needed a little handle there. Had just the tiniest bit of silver on that brush. The copper would have been better. Let's do that. There we go. We're going to come back in and work on our pumpkins some more. So we're getting really close to being done. We're going to do some more detail on our pumpkins. We're going to do some fine detail for highlights on our mirrors and our lights, maybe some tread on our tires, and then our pumpkin stems and leaves. So we're really close. Feel free to take a break whenever you need to. Go get yourself a cocktail, have a snack, walk the dog, get some steps in, and I'll be here when you get back. All right. Okay, so we are going to work on some more detail work on our pumpkin. I am going to use my small round brush, that one with the longer, pointier bristles. And the first thing I'm going to do is just use a little bit of my shadow color, which is that copper and brown, copper and black, making a little bit of brown. And if you need any more shadow, if it's sort of dried up or you lost it as it was drying, you can add just a tiny bit of it in now. And we're going to follow the same process that we used with our ghost pumpkin and that we did earlier. Once you get a little more shadow in, you can come in with that base tone of the orange and smooth out some of that shadow if it needs it. Sort of tone it down. And I even come in with a little bit of yellow with quick little hits for where I think that there might be some highlights. Like, remember, on the top of a curve, that's where the light's going to hit. That's where it's going to get highlighty. And again, if you're using that sort of chunky little stroke, those colors, while they're kind of funky when you're up close, if you step back, they're going to look great. Maybe even a little white. Oh, maybe not too much. Just little hits of it. Give that pumpkin some depth. And just rinse and repeat, my friends. So take your time. Shadow, base color, highlight. And you're not looking for perfect blends. Remember, using those sort of chunky strokes with hits of shadow and highlight makes the piece more interesting. Gives it more depth, more dimension, more for the eye to be like, hey, what's going on here? And when you make things messy on purpose, that's when you're good, you guys. Messy on purpose means that you're not wrong. You didn't do it wrong. You did it the way you wanted it. You can fiddle with your pumpkins as long as you like. But what I'm going to do is show you how to do the stems. So I'm going to make a little green. I'm still using my small round brush. Just give it a quick rinse. And I'm going to start by grabbing a blob of yellow. And then I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue to it. And that's going to give us green. Now you can adjust this. The more blue you add, the darker your green becomes. You can even add a tiny bit of black to it, and you'll get more of an evergreen tone, or that deeper green that we want to use for our stems. So let me show you what I've come up with there. Some green with just a tiny bit of black added to it. And I'm going to come in and just start painting in my stems. This is going to be my base color. You can use your smaller flat brush if you prefer, or you can use the small pointy one. But I'm going to do everything the same base color, and then we'll adjust things as we move along. So we've got our base coat of green in on our pumpkins, and we're just going to do a little bit of shadow and a little bit of light. So I'm going to make some more brown using my copper with a tiny bit of black. And where I think that there's going to be some shadow, maybe on the under part here of that stem, or on this guy, Wherever it curves over, the shadow will be underneath. But we're not really going for like perfect light here. We're just trying to create some visual interest. Little bits. Just to darken that up. Little touches. If you feel like you got too much, you can always take some more of your green. Sometimes I like to take a little yellow and mix it in with my green. And just do a few quick strokes down, following the curve of the shape of the stem. So I'm getting tiny bits of green with a little tiny hint of yellow. And where I want to add a little highlight or a little interest, I just put a little bloop there. So remember, highlights are on top, shadows are underneath of those curves. So just those little bits of yellow or lighter green. Hit it and quit it, my guys. Hit it and quit it. And it looks funky up close, just like with the pumpkins. You see those strokes and those lines, and they kind of make you a little nutty, but then you get up close, get some distance, and they look good. So up close can be weird. But back it up, then you get some shadow in there, some highlight. All right, so take your time with those stems and the leaf. And when you come back, we're going to put in our final little details, our fine details. We're going to add little hits of light to our mirrors and to our tail lights, and maybe some tread on the tires. Oh, I forgot a stem, so let me finish that up while you finish up yours, and then we'll come back and work on those last little bitty details. All right, it is time to work on our final details. So let's get those in. Just a couple quick little hits. I'm going to get my small round brush nice and clean. And one thing we can do is if we want to have a nice thin line here, what I like to do is just sort of gently hold the bristles between my thumb and my index finger, gentle pinch, and just rotate that brush, and it'll pull it up to a nice fine point. And I can just take a tiny bit of white, tiny bit of white, and just do a curved line right near the edge of that mirror. Just a curved little line, maybe two. We can do the same thing on our taillights. And that will help accentuate the round shape, add a little bit more dimension. Now I want to add just a little more highlight to my fender. So what I'm going to do is take my clean big brush. But let me not get ahead of you, sorry. Highlight here in white on the mirrors and the taillights. When you're ready, grab your big brush, get it clean, and you can add just a little bit more highlight with some silver streaks to your bumper. And at that point, we're pretty much done. I'm just going to come in and show you how to do some tread on your tires. All right, final step. Got my big brush, and I'm going to take just a tiny bit of silver and come through and do a little bit of a wiggly sort of line that looks like tread. I angle down and then the opposite direction and just make it look like tread. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just the very tip of those bristles. I don't know what happened here, but we're just going to go with it. If you absolutely loathe it, you can always come back after it dries, put a little more black paint over it, and then try again. but I think that's good enough. I'm pretty happy with it. What do you guys think? All right, so here it is, our harvest haul, our truck full of pumpkins. I hope you had fun painting today. I had a great time. I really appreciate you guys coming back. Make sure that you follow me on YouTube. I do some free tutorials and fun stuff over there. Paint with Mel on YouTube. You can find me as Paint with Mel on just about any of the social medias. But most of all, I recommend Paint with Mel and Friends. It's our Facebook group. That's where, you know, our members hang out and visit, show each other photos of our work, give some tips and tricks, and we just generally have a mutual admiration society. We will cheer each other on. So it has been a pleasure to paint with you today. Please send me photos of your work. You can always hashtag me, Paint with Mel, and hopefully I'll see it. And so enjoy your fall. There's going to be much more coming up. So check out paintwithmel.com so you can see our other fun fall, harvest, Halloweeny sort of stuff. And until the next time I see you, my friends, happy painting and be well. All right, bye you guys. Take care.